News of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In bars, markets, and government chambers, beings who had never heard of humans before now whispered their name with something between hope and disbelief. The Velcrin had retreated. The Alphas had been beaten, not destroyed, not defeated completely, but beaten nonetheless. And that small difference meant everything. On the mining world of Talos Prime, workers moved slowly through their shifts. They were called the Auric, a species of stocky humanoids with thick skin and patient dispositions. For 800 years they had mined precious metals for the Velcrin Empire. They worked long hours in dangerous conditions, and the Velcrin paid them almost nothing. Complaining meant execution. But on this day, an Auric supervisor named Boker watched the news on a cracked screen in the worker dormitory. He saw human ships facing down Velcrin dreadnoughts. He saw weapons that shouldn't work working. He saw the Velcrin running away. Boker made a decision. The next shipment of metals would be delayed. Just by a few days. Just enough to be annoying. If the Velcrin complained, he would blame equipment failures. What could they do? Execute the entire workforce? The mines would stop completely. It was a small act of defiance, but it was something. Across the galaxy, similar small acts multiplied. A merchant convoy accidentally delivered supplies to the wrong planet. A communications relay suffered mysterious technical problems. A tribute payment arrived 3 days late with no explanation. None of these acts alone meant much, but together, they were the sound of an empire beginning to crack. The Velcrin High Command met in their throne chamber on their homeworld of Velcros. The chamber was enormous, built to display their power. 12 members of the ruling council sat on elevated platforms, looking down on those who addressed them. They were the pinnacle of their species, the strongest and most ruthless. Overlord Thex, the commander who had been humiliated by Hyundai's escape, stood before them. His scales were dark with shame. "You allowed a human ship to steal our data," said High Commander Zeril, his voice like grinding stone. "You allowed them to escape, and now you failed to punish their homeworld. Explain yourself." Thex kept his head lowered. "The humans fought with unexpected capability. Their weapons bypassed our shields. Their tactics were unconventional. We were not prepared for resistance." "Not prepared?" Zeril's voice rose. "You commanded 20 dreadnoughts against 40 primitive vessels. You should have crushed them in minutes." "Yes, High Commander. The Empire's reputation has been damaged. Lesser species are questioning our authority. Some are openly defying us." Zeril leaned forward, his forearms gripping the armrests of his throne. "This cannot continue. We need a demonstration of power that will remind the galaxy why we rule." Another council member, Overlord Kresh, spoke up. "I suggest we target the Talos. They have refused their tribute payment. They claim technical difficulties, but our intelligence shows they are lying. The Talos are testing our resolve." The council murmured agreement. The Talos were perfect targets. They were a peaceful aquatic species, technologically advanced but militarily weak. They had always paid their tribute on time. "Until now, Purge Protocol," Zeril declared. "The Talos will be eliminated completely. Their worlds will serve as a reminder. Any species that defies us will face the same fate." The order went out within the hour. A Velcrin extermination fleet of 30 ships began moving toward Talos space. Their mission was clear: kill everything. Leave nothing. Erase the Talos from history, just like they had erased so many others. On Earth, Ambassador Yoon Hana received the intelligence report. Her hands shook as she read it. The Velcrin were going to commit genocide, and they were doing it because Earth had dared to stand up. She immediately contacted Admiral Quan Mireille. "We have to do something. The Talos are going to be exterminated because of us." "The Talos are 200 light-years away," Admiral Quan replied. "We barely have enough ships to defend Earth. We can't fight a war in another star system. So we just let them die?" Admiral Quan was silent for a long moment. "Contact Captain Hyundai. Tell him I need to see him immediately." Hyundai arrived at Admiral Quan's office an hour later. His face was tired. Since the Battle of Earth, he had become a symbol of human resistance. People wanted to meet him, interview him, make him a hero. He hated every minute of it. He was a ship captain, not a politician. "Captain," Admiral Quan said without preamble, "the Velcrin are going to exterminate the Talos species in retaliation for our actions. I'm assembling a task force to intervene. I want you to command it." Hyundai stared at her. "Admiral, with respect, that's suicide. We barely survived defending our home territory. We can't win a battle in enemy space. You're right. We probably can't win, but we can save lives. Intelligence suggests the Talus have about 5 billion people spread across 3 water worlds. If we can evacuate even a fraction of them, it will be worth it. And if we lose our entire fleet in the process, what happens to Earth then? Then Earth will fall. But at least we'll fall knowing we tried to save someone else. Isn't that better than surviving by watching genocide happen? Hyundai closed his eyes. He thought about his crew, his ship, his life. He thought about all the species on that list from the derelict Velcrin dreadnought, civilizations that had died while the galaxy watched and did nothing. I'll need volunteers only, he said finally. Nobody gets forced into this. Agreed. Admiral Kwan put out the call. She expected maybe 10 ships to volunteer. Instead, she got 43. Pilots, engineers, Marines, all volunteering to fly into almost certain death to save a species most of them had never heard of. Dr. Choi Nari insisted on coming. You'll need someone who understands Talus biology to coordinate evacuations, she argued. Hyundai tried to refuse, but she was right. She was always right. Park Jinwoo volunteered immediately, of course. The young pilot grinned when Hyundai questioned his decision. Where else am I going to find this much excitement? He said. But Hyundai saw the fear in his eyes. Jinwoo knew this might be a one-way trip. The human fleet departed Earth a week later. They jumped through multiple systems, using routes that Ambassador Yoon Hana had quietly obtained from sympathetic species. By the time they reached Talus space, the Velcrin extermination had already begun. The scenes were horrifying. Velcrin ships orbited the Talus homeworld, bombarding cities with plasma weapons. The oceans boiled. Millions died every hour. The Talus had a small defense fleet, but it was being systematically destroyed. All ships, Hyundai broadcast. Our mission is evacuation, not engagement. Get as many Talus onto transports as possible. Avoid Velcrin ships when you can. Fight only when you must. The human fleet dove into chaos. Ships landed on surviving Talus cities, loading refugees as fast as possible. Others engaged Velcrin bombers trying to buy time. The Velcrin were surprised by the human arrival, but they didn't slow their attack. If anything, they intensified it. Park Jinwoo led his squadron in desperate runs, harassing Velcrin capital ships and drawing their fire away from evacuation transports. His fighter was hit 3 times, but he kept flying, kept fighting, kept buying precious minutes for refugees below. Dr. Choi Nari coordinated with Talus leaders, identifying population centers that could still be evacuated. She worked 18-hour shifts, sleeping in brief intervals, driven by the knowledge that every second mattered. Engineer Lim Taeyang, who had insisted on joining the mission, worked miracles keeping damaged ships operational. When one transport lost its engines, he jury-rigged a thruster system from spare parts in 40 minutes. When shields failed, he rerouted power from weapons. He kept the fleet flying through sheer determination. Captain Song Isul, commander of Earth's Special Operations Forces, led Marines in ground operations. They evacuated Talus from areas under heavy bombardment, fighting through collapsed buildings and burning streets. She lost 12 soldiers in the first day. She refused to lose any more and became even more ruthless in her tactics. The battle raged for 5 days. It was chaos, desperate and terrible. The Velcrin showed no mercy. They bombed evacuation sites. They targeted refugee transports. They wanted complete extermination, and they didn't care who got in their way. On the 5th day, with fires consuming the Talus homeworld, Hyundai gave the order to withdraw. His fleet was battered, running low on ammunition and fuel. 20 ships had been destroyed. The survivors were held together by luck and skill, but in their cargo holds were 3 billion Talus refugees. 3 billion lives saved from certain death. As the human fleet jumped to faster than light speed, Hyundai looked at the casualty reports. 2,000 human soldiers and crew had died. The Horizon's Edge had taken severe damage. They had saved 3 billion, but 2 billion more had perished. Was it a victory? Hyundai didn't know. But he knew they had tried. And somehow, that mattered. The galaxy watched the Battle of Talus 4 with stunned silence. Humans had traveled 200 light-years to save a species they barely knew. They had fought the mighty Velcrin not for conquest or profit, but simply because it was right. They had lost lives and ships for strangers. The Velcrin had demonstrated their power by killing 2 billion innocents. Humans had demonstrated their character by saving 3 billion. The Talus refugees arrived at Earth 3 weeks after their rescue. They came in damaged ships carrying only what they could grab during the evacuation. They had lost their homeworld, most of their people, and everything they had built over thousands of years. They should have been broken. Instead, they were angry. Ambassador Yoon Hana met with the Talus leaders in a temporary shelter constructed in the Pacific. The Talus were aquatic beings, requiring water environments to survive. Their leader, a large female named Callis, moved through the water with fluid grace despite her obvious grief. "Your people saved us," Callis said through a translator device. "Why? We had nothing to offer you." "We are not powerful. We cannot repay this debt." "We didn't do it for repayment," Yoon Hana replied. "We did it because it was necessary. Because watching genocide happen without trying to stop it makes us complicit." Callis was quiet for a moment. "The Velcrin have ruled for 3,000 years because nobody stands against them. Individual species cannot win. But you humans stood anyway. That is either bravery or foolishness." "Probably both," Yoon Hana admitted with a small smile. "Then we choose to be brave fools as well. The Talus will fight beside humanity. We have lost our world, but we will help you free others from Velcrin tyranny." That conversation was repeated across the galaxy. The Auric miners, who had delayed their tribute, openly refused to work for the Velcrin. The Havani merchants stopped transporting Velcrin goods. The Cortash scientists refused to develop weapons for the Empire. Dozens of species, emboldened by human actions, began their own quiet rebellions. The Velcrin responded with brutal force. They executed dissidents publicly. They bombed industrial centers. They sent military governors to enforce order. But the resistance only grew stronger. For every person executed, 10 more joined the rebellion. Ambassador Yoon Hana worked tirelessly to coordinate this growing resistance. She established secret communication networks, smuggled weapons to rebel groups, and organized supply lines. She called it the Shadow Coalition, an alliance of 47 species united in opposition to Velcrin rule. But building a coalition was easier than winning a war. The Velcrin still controlled most of the galaxy. Their military was vast and experienced, and they were becoming more ruthless with each passing month. Earth needed a strategy that didn't rely on winning battles. They needed something else. General Shin Hyok was appointed commander of United Earth Defense Forces 6 months after the Battle of Talus. He was 52 years old, a career military officer who had studied warfare from every culture and species he could find. He was not the strongest or the loudest, but he was the smartest. His first order was to assemble a think tank. Scientists, historians, psychologists, strategists. Their mission was simple: figure out how to defeat an enemy that was stronger, more numerous, and more experienced. Dr. Kang Ji-won was part of that think tank. She was a psychologist who specialized in understanding alien cultures. She spent months studying Velcrin behavior, watching recordings of their battles, analyzing their decisions. And she found something interesting. The Velcrin are apex predators, she explained during a briefing. They evolved at the top of their food chain on a stable world. They never had to adapt to change because nothing challenged them. When they expanded into space, they conquered easily because most species weren't militaristic. The Velcrin learned that overwhelming force solves everything. So they're predictable, General Shin Hyuk said. More than that, they're psychologically dependent on hierarchy and dominance. They need to feel superior. When that feeling is threatened, they become aggressive but also panicked. They don't know how to handle losing because they so rarely lose. General Shin Hyuk smiled. Then we make them lose constantly. Small losses all over the galaxy. We make them chase ghosts and fight shadows. We turn their strength into a weakness. He called it the strategy of 1,000 cuts. Never fight the Velcrin in open battle where they could use their superior numbers. Instead, raid their supply lines. Sabotage their facilities. Spread false intelligence that forces them to waste resources chasing phantom threats. Make them defend everywhere, which means they defend nowhere effectively. Captain Song Yisol became the face of this strategy. Her special operations team struck across the galaxy, appearing where the Velcrin didn't expect them, and vanishing before reinforcements arrived. They destroyed supply depots, they rescued prisoners, they gathered intelligence, and most importantly, they taught local resistance groups how to fight. One mission took Song Yisol to the industrial world of Corvin. The Velcrin had established a weapons factory there, using slave labor from the native population. Song Yisol's team infiltrated the facility over the course of 3 weeks, replacing ammunition in the factory's storage with defective rounds. The ammunition looked perfect. It tested perfectly, but under combat conditions it would explode inside the weapon, killing whoever used it. By the time the Velkrin discovered the sabotage, they had distributed millions of defective rounds throughout their military. Another mission involved infiltrating a Velkrin communication hub. Engineer Lim Taeyang, who had become Song Isol's go-to technical expert, created a virus that slowly corrupted the Velkrin tactical database. Ship locations were wrong by a few degrees. Supply schedules were delayed by a few hours. Navigation coordinates were off by small amounts. Nothing obvious, but enough to create constant problems. The Velkrin military began suffering from 1,000 small malfunctions. Ships arrived at the wrong locations. Supplies went to the wrong units. Communications were garbled. Their efficient war machine started grinding and stuttering. Park Jinwoo, now a squadron commander, specialized in hit-and-run attacks. His pilots would strike a Velkrin convoy, destroy a few ships, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The Velkrin would send reinforcements, but by then Jinwoo's squadron was 3 systems away, hitting another target. The Velkrin couldn't defend everything. Their empire was too large, their enemies too many. They started pulling back from outlying territories to concentrate their forces. It was a logical decision, but it meant abandoning control of hundreds of systems. The Shadow Coalition moved into those abandoned systems immediately. They established their own governments, their own trade networks. The Velkrin Empire, which had been expanding for 3 millennia, was suddenly contracting. Admiral Quan Mirai, now the overall commander of coalition forces, watched the strategic maps with satisfaction. Red zones showing Velkrin control were shrinking. Green zones showing coalition territory were growing. But she knew the real war hadn't started yet. "They're going to use their ultimate weapon soon," she told General Shin Hyok during a strategy meeting. "They're losing control and they're going to panic. When they panic, they'll resort to mass destruction." "Antimatter bombardment?" General Shin asked. "Probably. They have the weapons to render entire planets uninhabitable. They've used them before on species that resisted. They'll use them again. We need to stop them before they reach that point." Admiral Quan nodded slowly. "We need them to believe that using those weapons would be suicide. We need a credible threat against their core worlds." That's when she conceived Operation Checkmate. It was audacious, dangerous, and probably wouldn't work, but it was their only option. Engineer Lim Taeyang and his team worked for 6 months on the project. They created false sensor signatures that mimicked weapons platforms. They built sophisticated holograms that looked like real ships. They planted false intelligence throughout Velkrin networks about a secret human weapon program. Then they deployed the fake weapons around every major Velkrin world. The sensor data showed planet-killing weapons in orbit, powered and ready to fire. The intelligence reports claimed humans had developed antimatter weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. It was all fake. Smoke and mirrors. But the Velkrin believed it. Captain Song Isul's intelligence operatives helped sell the deception. They leaked documents showing the weapon specifications. They planted evidence of secret testing. They even staged a fake weapons test in an uninhabited system, using conventional explosives to simulate an antimatter detonation. The Velkrin High Command called an emergency meeting. Overlord Ziral stared at the intelligence reports with disbelief and growing fear. "How did humans develop antimatter weapons?" he demanded. "They're a primitive species. Their technology is centuries behind ours." "Apparently we underestimated them," Overlord Kresh replied grimly. "Or they stole the technology from someone else. It doesn't matter. If these weapons are real, they can destroy our homeworld. Can we verify this intelligence? Our agents have confirmed it. The weapons exist. They're deployed. They're targeting our core worlds." Zeral slumped in his throne. For the first time in his life, he felt true fear. The Velkrin Empire had always ruled through overwhelming force. They could destroy any enemy completely. But now, if they used their ultimate weapons, the enemy could retaliate by destroying Velkrin worlds. It was a stalemate, a balance of terror, and the Velkrin didn't know how to function in a galaxy where they weren't the strongest. "Order all forces to halt offensive operations," Zeral said quietly. "No antimatter weapons are to be used without direct approval from this council. We need to reassess our strategy." Earth looked beautiful from orbit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. Hyundai had seen it 1,000 times, but today it felt different. Today he was bringing home something that could destroy everything. The Horizon's Edge docked at Luna Station, the massive space platform orbiting Earth's moon. Military personnel were waiting for them. Word had spread quickly that a human ship had encountered Velcrin patrols and escaped. That alone was newsworthy. Humans didn't survive encounters with the Velcrin. Admiral Kwan Mirai was waiting in the briefing room. She was 60 years old with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded Earth's defense forces for 20 years, always walking the careful line between protecting humanity and not angering their Velcrin masters. "Captain Hyundai," she said formally, "your report mentioned data recovered from a derelict vessel. I want to see it." Hyundai transferred the files to the room's main screen. For 30 minutes, Admiral Kwan and her staff reviewed everything. The list of eliminated species, the stolen technology, the proof that the Velcrin Empire was stagnant and parasitic. The room grew quieter with each revelation. Finally, Admiral Kwan sat back in her chair. "This is either the most important discovery in human history, or it's our death sentence." "Possibly both. What do we do with it?" asked Choi Nari. She had barely slept since their return, too excited and terrified by what they had found. "That's not my decision alone," Admiral Kwan said. "The Council needs to see this." The United Earth Council met in emergency session. Representatives from every major nation and colony gathered to watch Hyundai's presentation. The chamber was silent as the evidence played out on their screens. Genocide, theft, lies. The foundation of Velcrin power was rotten. When Hyundai finished, the debate began immediately. "We need to destroy this data," said Council Member Park from the Asian Union. "If the Velcrin discover we have this, they'll exterminate us. We've seen what they do to species who defy them. But other species need to know the truth," argued Council Member Williams from North America. "The Velcrin have been lying to the galaxy for millennia. Someone has to expose them. And you think that someone should be us?" Park shot back. "We're one of the weakest species in the galaxy. The Velcrin could wipe us out in a week. This information is dangerous." Ambassador Yoon Hana stood up. She was young for a council member, only 40, but she was brilliant at politics and diplomacy. "We're already in danger," she said calmly. "The Velcrin patrol commander who chased Captain Hyundai's ship filed a report. They know humans were near their derelict. They'll investigate. If we do nothing, we look guilty. If we act first, we control the narrative." "What are you suggesting?" asked the council chairman. Yoon Hana smiled. "We share the information, not just with Earth, but with every species in the galaxy. We make it impossible for the Velcrin to suppress, and we do it openly as an act of transparency, not espionage." The room erupted in arguments. Some called it suicide. Others called it necessary. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Admiral Kwan stood. Everyone fell silent. She commanded respect that politicians could only dream of. "For 300 years, humans have survived by being small and quiet," she said. "We've bent the knee, followed orders, and accepted our place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. And where has it gotten us? We're trapped in our own star system, forbidden from expanding, treated like children. The Velcrin tell us this is for our own good. But I look at this data, and I see species who thought the same thing. Species who obeyed, who followed the rules, and who were eliminated anyway when they became inconvenient." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Maybe it's time we stopped being small and quiet. Maybe it's time we stood up, even if it costs us everything. Because living on our knees isn't really living at all." The vote was close, but the decision was made. Earth would release the data to the galaxy. They would expose the Velcrin's crimes and hope that truth would be shield enough. Ambassador Yoon Hana worked day and night to prepare. She contacted representatives from dozens of species, building a network of allies who would help spread the information. Many were afraid. Some refused. But others, species who had suffered under Velcrin rule, quietly agreed to help. The broadcast went out on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. Every communication channel in the galaxy received it simultaneously. Ambassador Yoon Hana appeared on screens across 400 star systems, her voice calm and clear. "People of the galaxy," she began, "we are humans of Earth. For 3 millennia, we have been told that the Velcrin Empire brings order and peace to the stars. Today we present evidence that challenges that narrative. The data played, the list of eliminated species, the technological theft, the genocide records, everything. Ambassador Yoon Hana didn't editorialize or accuse. She simply presented facts and let them speak. We release this information not as an attack but as an act of transparency, she concluded. Every species deserves to know the truth about those who rule them. What you do with this truth is your choice. The response was immediate and explosive. The broadcast went viral across the galaxy. News networks replayed it constantly. Social media platforms erupted with discussion. Some called humans liars and troublemakers. Others called them heroes. But everyone was talking about it. The Velcrin response came 6 hours later. Their high command issued a statement calling the data fabricated and humans criminals. They demanded Earth surrender Captain Han Dae, Dr. Choi Nari, and everyone involved in the theft and defamation. They gave Earth 72 hours to comply. Admiral Kwan Mirai stood in the command center, watching Velcrin warships gather at the edge of Earth's solar system. 20 massive dreadnoughts, each capable of destroying a city with a single shot. They hung in space like a threat made real. They're not going to wait 72 hours, said her tactical officer. This is an invasion force. I know, Admiral Kwan replied. How's our defense grid? Operational, but outmatched. If they attack, we'll last maybe an hour. Admiral Kwan nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Velcrin ruled through fear, and humans had just challenged that fear publicly. The Empire couldn't let that stand unpunished. But humanity had been preparing too. In the weeks since recovering the data, Earth's engineers had been working on something new. Something the Velcrin wouldn't expect. Engineer Lim Taeyang entered the command center. He was disheveled and exhausted, but his eyes were bright. It's ready, he announced. All defense platforms are equipped with the new systems. Will it work? Admiral Kwan asked. Lim Taeyang shrugged. The theory is sound. Velcrin shields operate on a fixed frequency because they've never needed to adapt them. Our weapons are designed to exploit that, but we've never tested them in combat. I guess we're about to find out. The Velcrin deadline passed. 6 hours later, their fleet began moving toward Earth. They came slowly, confident and unstoppable. 20 dreadnoughts against Earth's ragtag defense force of 40 smaller ships. The outcome seemed certain. Admiral Kwan broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Kwan Mirai of United Earth Defense. Velcrin forces, you are approaching our homeworld without authorization. Turn back or we will defend ourselves. The Velcrin response was simple. Surrender or die. Then we'll die on our feet, Admiral Kwan replied. All ships engage. The Battle of Earth began. Human ships accelerated toward the Velcrin fleet, weapons firing. The Velcrin returned fire with devastating precision. 3 human ships exploded in the first minute. But then something unexpected happened. Human weapons started penetrating Velcrin shields. The new frequency-shifting railguns that engineer Lim Taeyang designed punched through defenses that should have been impenetrable. Missiles equipped with adaptive targeting found their marks. Drone swarms overwhelmed Velcrin point defense systems. The Velcrin were shocked. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Humans were weak, primitive, barely worth noticing, yet their weapons were working. Their tactics were effective. And most disturbing of all, they were fighting with a ferocity the Velcrin hadn't seen in centuries. Park Jinwoo led a fighter squadron in an insane attack run, weaving between Velcrin capital ships and targeting their engine clusters. His wingmen followed his every move, trusting his instincts completely. They destroyed the engines on 2 dreadnoughts before the Velcrin could adjust their defenses. The battle raged for 3 hours. Earth lost 28 ships, but the Velcrin lost 5 dreadnoughts and retreated with 8 more damaged. They had come to deliver a quick, brutal lesson. Instead, they had been bloodied by a species they considered inferior. As the Velcrin fleet withdrew, every screen in the galaxy showed the same image. Earth's defenders standing their ground. The mighty Velcrin forced to retreat. It should have been impossible, but it had happened, and the galaxy would never be the same. Part 1. The Discovery. The stars stretched endlessly before Captain Han Dae as he stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge. His ship was small compared to the massive vessels that ruled the galaxy, but it was home. For 3 months, his crew had been mapping the empty space near the neutral zone, recording planets and asteroids that nobody cared about. It was boring work, but it kept them away from trouble. Han Dae was a careful man. He had survived 15 years in space by following rules and avoiding risks. The galaxy was dangerous for humans. Everyone knew that. The Velcrin Empire controlled everything, and they did not like it when smaller species caused problems. Dr. Choi Nari walked onto the bridge carrying her datapad. She was the ship's scientist, always curious about everything she found. Her eyes were bright with excitement as she approached Hyundai. "Captain, we found something unusual," she said, pointing at the screen. "There's a ship drifting near the fourth planet. It's big, really big." Hyundai looked at the readings. The ship was enormous, at least 10 times larger than his vessel. The energy signature was weak but recognizable. His stomach tightened. "That's a Velcrin dreadnought," he said quietly. Everyone on the bridge went silent. The Velcrin were the rulers of the galaxy. They were massive reptilian creatures standing 8 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and armored scales that could stop bullets. For 3,000 years, they had conquered every species they encountered. They called themselves the Alphas, and nobody dared to argue. Humans were barely noticed by the Velcrin. Earth and its few colony worlds were restricted to their tiny corner of space. Humans were considered weak and primitive. They were told where they could go and what they could do. Breaking Velcrin rules meant death. "Should we report it?" asked Park Jinwoo, the young pilot. He was only 25, talented but reckless. Hyundai had spent half his time keeping the boy out of trouble. "We should leave," Hyundai said firmly. "This isn't our business." But Choi Nari was already studying the readings. "Captain, the ship is dead. No life signs, no power. It's been drifting for years, maybe decades. This could be an incredible opportunity to learn about Velcrin technology." Hyundai shook his head. "And if they catch us near it, they'll execute us for spying." Choi Nari met his eyes. "When will humans ever get another chance like this? We spend our lives following their rules, staying in our corner, never learning, never growing." "One look, Captain. Just one look." Hyundai knew he should refuse. Every instinct told him to turn the ship around and forget what they had seen. But he also knew Choi Nari was right. Humans had been kneeling for centuries. Maybe it was time to stand up, even if just for a moment. "Fine," he said. 1 hour. We scan the ship, take some readings, and leave. Nobody touches anything." The Horizon's Edge docked with the massive Velcrin vessel carefully. The airlock hissed open and Hyundai led a small team inside. The interior was dark and cold. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors built for creatures much larger than humans. Everything was massive. The doorways were 12 feet tall. The control panels were positioned high on the walls. Even the chairs looked like thrones. This ship had been built for giants. They moved deeper into the vessel. Choi Nari scanned everything, her equipment recording data hungrily. Park Jinwoo stayed close to Hyundai, his hand near his weapon. The silence was oppressive. They found the ship's data core in what looked like a command center. Choi Nari connected her equipment and started downloading files. "This is incredible," she whispered. "I'm getting tactical data, ship designs, communication logs. This is years of information." "How much longer?" Hyundai asked, watching the shadows nervously. 10 minutes. Hyundai nodded and explored the command center. The walls were covered with screens and displays, all dark now. But one console still had power, a dim emergency light blinking slowly. He approached it carefully and touched the controls. The screen flickered to life, showing text in the Velcrin language. Hyundai had learned to read it during his military training. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was a list of species. Hundreds of names, each with a date and a status. Most of the statuses said the same thing: eliminated, erased, purged. These were civilizations the Velcrin had completely destroyed. Species that had resisted Velcrin rule and paid the ultimate price. Entire worlds gone, billions of lives extinguished. And the galaxy never knew because the Velcrin had erased every trace of them. "Nari," Hyundai called quietly. "You need to see this." Choi Nari came over and read the screen. Her face went pale. "They've been hiding this. All these species murdered and forgotten. The galaxy thinks the Velcrin are just strong rulers. Nobody knows they're mass murderers." "Download everything," Hyundai ordered. "We need proof." As Choi Nari worked, Hyundai noticed something else in the data. The Velcrin technology hadn't advanced in centuries. Every new weapon, every ship design, every innovation had been stolen from conquered species. The Velcrin hadn't invented anything themselves in over 300 years. They just took what others created and put their name on it. They were parasites pretending to be gods, Captain. Park Jinwoo's voice crackled over the radio. "We have company. 3 Velcrin patrol ships just entered the system." Hyundai's heart raced. How long until they reach us? 20 minutes, maybe less. Nari, we need to go now. Almost done. She worked frantically, her fingers flying over the controls. Got it, let's move. They ran back through the dark corridors, their footsteps echoing in the empty ship. The horizon's edge was waiting, engines already warming up. They jumped through the airlock and sealed it behind them. Jinwoo, get us out of here, Hyundai shouted as he reached the bridge. The young pilot's hands danced over the controls. The horizon's edge detached from the derelict and accelerated away. On the screens, Hyundai could see the Velcrin patrol ships approaching fast. They were sleek and deadly, built for hunting. They're hailing us, reported the communications officer. Ignore it. Jinwoo, maximum speed. They're faster than us, Captain. We can't outrun them. Hyundai clenched his fists. They were going to die here, caught stealing from the masters of the galaxy. But then Park Jinwoo smiled, that reckless grin that always meant trouble. I have an idea, the pilot said. It's crazy, but it might work. Do it, Hyundai ordered. Jinwoo sent the ship diving toward the nearby planet, accelerating into its atmosphere. The Velcrin ships followed, confident in their superior speed and weapons. But Jinwoo wasn't running in a straight line. He wove between clouds, used atmospheric currents, and pushed the ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. The Velcrin ships, built for space combat, struggled in the atmosphere. They were powerful but not agile. Jinwoo used the planet's gravity and weather against them, forcing the Velcrin pilots to choose between keeping up or crashing. One of the Velcrin ships pulled back. Then another. The third ship stayed on their tail, determined to catch them. Jinwoo led it through a canyon, flying so low that rocks scraped against their shields. The Velcrin ship, twice their size, couldn't follow. It pulled up at the last second. They escaped into space and jumped to faster-than-light speed before the Velcrin could regroup. On the bridge, everyone was breathing hard. They had survived. Barely. Hyundai looked at the data they had stolen. In his hands was proof that the mighty Velcrin Empire was built on lies, theft, and genocide. The question was, what would they do with it? The answer would change the galaxy forever. The Velcrin Empire collapsed slowly, then all at once. For 18 months after Operation Checkmate, their military remained paralyzed by fear of human retaliation. During that time, the Shadow Coalition grew stronger. More species joined. More territory was liberated. The red zones on Admiral Quan Murray's strategic maps shrank week by week. But the Velcrin High Command was not idle. They were investigating, and eventually they found the truth. The emergency meeting was called at dawn on Velcros. Every member of the High Command was present, along with their top military advisors and intelligence chiefs. Overlord Zeral stood before a massive display showing sensor data, intelligence reports, and analysis results. The human weapons don't exist, he said flatly. They're elaborate fakes. Sensor ghosts, holograms, there are no antimatter weapons orbiting our worlds. There never were. The room erupted in angry shouts. Overlords demanded to know how they had been deceived. Intelligence chiefs blamed each other. Military commanders called for immediate retaliation. Zeral raised one of his forearms, commanding silence. The humans tricked us. They exploited our fear and our assumptions. They made us afraid to use our own weapons. And while we hesitated, they built an alliance that now controls half the galaxy. Then we destroy them now, Overlord Kresh growled. We unleash everything. We show the galaxy what happens to species who defy us. And what happens when we do? Zeral asked. We destroy Earth and its allies. We kill billions. And then what? Do we rule over ashes and corpses? Do we rebuild an empire based on fear of our genocide? We've done it before. Yes, and that's why we're in this position. We ruled through terror for 3,000 years. We conquered, enslaved, and exterminated. We thought strength meant dominance. But the humans showed us something we forgot. Strength can also mean endurance, adaptation, cooperation. Kresh stared at Zeral with disbelief. You sound like you admire them. I understand them, Zeral corrected. And I understand that our empire is finished. Not because we lost militarily, but because we lost morally. The galaxy doesn't fear us anymore. They hate us. And hate builds resistance faster than fear ever could. The debate raged for hours. Some overlords demanded total war. Others argued for negotiation. The Velcrin High Command, which had ruled with unified authority for millennia, began to fracture. Over the next 6 months, the fractures widened into cracks and then into chasms. Different Velcrin commanders made different decisions. Some withdrew their forces to fortified core worlds. Others continued fighting the coalition. A few even attempted to negotiate peace with local resistance groups. The unified Velcrin Empire ceased to exist. In its place were dozens of competing Velcrin factions, each claiming to be the legitimate government. Some were militaristic and aggressive. Others were reformists seeking reconciliation. Most were simply confused, trying to maintain control in a galaxy that no longer obeyed them. Velcrin civil war erupted within the year. Brother fought brother. Fleet fought fleet. Worlds that had been under Velcrin control for centuries watched their former masters destroy each other and quietly slipped away to join the coalition. On Earth, Ambassador Yoon Hana faced the question that would define humanity's legacy. What do we do with our victory? The Coalition Council met on a neutral station orbiting a gas giant. Representatives from 93 species gathered, including several Velcrin reformist groups. The chamber was filled with beings of every shape and size, all united by their opposition to the old empire. "We should exterminate them," said the Auric representative, his voice hard with rage. "They exterminated us when we resisted. They killed billions. They destroyed worlds. They deserve the same fate." Many representatives nodded in agreement. The Velcrin had caused unimaginable suffering. Justice demanded punishment. Many argued that leaving Velcrin alive meant leaving the threat of future tyranny. Admiral Han Day, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and serving as Earth's military representative, stood to speak. He was older now, with gray in his hair and scars from a dozen battles. But his voice was still strong. "I understand your anger," he said. "I've fought the Velcrin. I've seen what they can do. I've lost friends to their weapons. But I ask you to consider something. What kind of galaxy do we want to build?" He paused, looking around the chamber. The Velcrin ruled through fear and genocide. They were strong, but they were cruel. They conquered, but they destroyed. If we respond to their cruelty with more cruelty, if we answer genocide with genocide, then what have we become? We'll just be the new alphas, ruling through fear instead of cooperation. "They don't deserve mercy," someone shouted. "Maybe not," Hyundai agreed. "But we deserve to be better than they were. The age of alphas should end, not because we killed them all, but because we chose a different path. A path based on cooperation, not domination. On justice, not revenge." Ambassador Yoon Hana stood beside Hyundai. "We're proposing the formation of the Galactic Commonwealth, a federation of free species with no dominant power. Every species gets representation. Decisions are made collectively. No single race can impose its will on others." "And the Velcrin?" asked the Talus representative, Callus, who had become one of humanity's strongest allies. "What place do they have in this commonwealth?" "The same place as everyone else," Yoon Hana replied. "If they agree to dismantle their military hierarchy, accept oversight and participate as equals, they're welcome. If they refuse, they can remain in their isolated worlds. We won't exterminate them, but we won't let them rule either." The debate lasted 3 days. It was heated, emotional, and sometimes violent. Species who had suffered under Velcrin rule wanted vengeance. Others worried that showing mercy was showing weakness. Some feared the Velcrin would rebuild and attack again. But slowly, the tide turned. Representatives remembered why they had fought. Not to become conquerors themselves, but to be free. Not to dominate others, but to live in peace. The vote was close, but the Commonwealth was established. The Velcrin response was mixed. Most older Velcrin, raised in the culture of dominance, rejected the Commonwealth utterly. They retreated to a handful of fortress worlds and closed their borders. They would live in isolation rather than accept equality. But younger Velcrin, those who had never known the old empire's glory, chose differently. Led by a reformist named Vikar, they accepted the Commonwealth's terms. They dismantled their military fleets. They opened their worlds to oversight. They chose to be members rather than masters. It wasn't easy. Many species couldn't forgive the Velcrin for their crimes. Violence still erupted occasionally. But slowly, painfully, reconciliation began. The Commonwealth flourished. Dr. Choi Nari established the Institute of Adaptive Sciences, teaching human principles of innovation and flexibility to other species. Scientists from dozens of worlds collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under Velcrin rule. Engineer Lim Taiyang created an open-source technology initiative, sharing human innovations freely across the galaxy. Other species contributed their own knowledge. Technology that had stagnated for centuries under Velcrin control began advancing rapidly. Captain Song Isol became the director of Commonwealth Intelligence. Her job was no longer to fight enemies but to prevent conflicts before they started. She built networks of cooperation, using the same skills she had once used for sabotage. Park Jin-woo, the reckless young pilot who had helped start everything, became an instructor at the new Commonwealth Defense Academy. He taught students from 100 different species, sharing human tactics and strategies. His classes were always full. Everyone wanted to learn how humans had defeated the Alphas. General Shin Hyuk retired from active service but remained as an advisor. His strategy of 1,000 cuts was studied by every military academy in the galaxy. He had proven that intelligence and adaptation could defeat raw power. Admiral Kwan Mire served as the first Commonwealth Security Coordinator. She oversaw the demilitarization of aggressive species and the defense of vulnerable ones. She was fair but firm, earning respect across the galaxy. 50 years after the fall of the Velcrin Empire, Admiral Han Day stood on Earth's surface watching the sky. He was old now, his body worn by time and war, but his eyes were still sharp. Above him, ships from 400 species crossed the sky. They were gathering for the Commonwealth Unity Festival, an annual celebration of galactic cooperation. Ships of every size and design, representing civilizations that had once been enemies or strangers, now flying together in peace. His granddaughter, Lieutenant Han Suji, stood beside him. She was 23, wearing the uniform of the Commonwealth Defense Force. She had never known the Velcrin Empire. She had grown up in a galaxy of equals. "Grandfather," she asked, "was it worth it? All the battles, all the sacrifices, all the people who died?" Han Day was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his crew aboard the Horizon's Edge, many of whom hadn't survived the wars. He thought about the billions who died on Talos 4 despite their rescue attempts. He thought about the long years of fighting, the fear, the uncertainty. "We didn't fight to become heroes," he said finally. "We fought because someone had to stand up. The Velcrin ruled as alphas because nobody challenged them. We erased their legacy not by destroying them but by proving that their way of ruling was wrong." "But was it worth it?" Suji pressed.